Welcome back to the Draft FC podcast, the podcast website and YouTube channel dedicated to all things official Draft FPL. My name is Mitch and I'm your host for another Gameweek preview, going over waiver options, hidden gems and general Premier League chat ahead of Gameweek 13. And it has been an awful week of sport from my perspective. England absolutely capitulated to lose the first Ashes test in less than 2 days. Something you'd have to try pretty hard to go out of your way to do, which I guess from the outside it kind of looks like that's what they were doing. Spurs obviously put up possibly the most pathetic North London derby performance I've ever seen in my life. And then later on, the Eagles chucked away a 21-point lead to lose against the Cowboys on Sunday night. Slightly more promising watching Spurs lose to PSG last night. Lost in style, at least, so that was okay. We actually got the ball over the halfway line into the opposition's half, but hoping for a bit of a better week of sport. I need something to look forward to in any format. I'll take it this week. It was another game week where there were some big scores out there, particularly big scores, no doubt, hanging around in your waiver pile. Lots of us were dropping the Nottingham Forest defenders. A few of them did well, not least Murillo got 17 points. Dewsbury Hall with a lovely 13 points, scoring the goal, getting everything else in that game. And a whole host of other defenders that ended up on double digits. Due to the fixture pile up over the next 9-10 days, the Gameweek 13 fixtures all sit within Saturday and Sunday because Gameweek 14 kicks off on Tuesday, which means we will finish the game week on Sunday night. There will be waivers on Monday night. Game week kicks off on Tuesday night. Game week 14 will run Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we will have waivers first thing Friday morning for game week 15 to kick off at the usual time on Saturday again. And then we've got a couple of more normally spaced game weeks before we hit Christmas. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides' time, but that will obviously mean some rotation creeping in. So recording this on Thursday, the 27th of November, so any team news, injury developments, or press conference info are up to date as of now. And of course, subject to change. Some of those press conferences are literally happening as I'm recording now. So I'll try and have a little peek in a minute before I get to the end of the recording, just in case there's anything I need to shoehorn in at the end. But without further ado, let's get straight into it. So let's kick things off with Waiver Watch. Was an interesting one last week. The main players coming in, Mosquera was right up there. You'll see that Hincapié was down at about 20. I mean, they were both pretty popular pickups. Mosquera 33% wavered in, Hincapié 25%. So both movers, but most people, I guess, were tending to agree with me that they felt Mosquera was the most likely to start. I did sort of sit on the fence a bit and say that, particularly those higher up the pecking order in terms of waivers or those in bigger leagues, that you'd be very well within your rights to punt on a waiver for Hincapié just in case. And you would have proved very much right. Elsewhere, Doku, Ballard, Digne, not a great move. Ahmad, Buendia, Garnacho, and De Ligt. So not huge rip-roaring successes there from the players coming in. The players leaving, Paqueta, who was banned and will be back for Game Week 13, Diouf, Kolo Muani, Jaden Anthony, Dan Burn, Murphy, Trippier, Ryan Aït-Nouri, and somewhat surprisingly, Marino was just creeping in there on the most wavered out list too, which, was a mistake because he got a return in the North London derby. And I fully expect him to start this weekend too. So, I wonder if he will be back on the reverse side of this list when we have a look ahead of Game Week 14. Key injuries and suspensions, not many to talk about really. Trossard went off early in Arsenal's Champions League fixture against Bayern Munich last night. Doesn't seem like it was that bad, and I think it was just because they had options on the bench. They didn't really want to risk him. And arguably, he is their most informed attacker at the moment and one of the first names on the team sheet. So probably just precautionary. We should get news, I think, today from Arsenal's press conference, which means, we should be going into the waivers knowing what's going on with him. So if you are holding him and looking at dropping him, maybe just wait before you pencil that waiver move in. Palmer, we got a weird update that as part of his timeout, he also broke his toe, possibly kicking a furniture unit playing video games. It doesn't sound too bad, and there's a chance he could make the bench as early as this weekend. So we'll see. Could be midweek or the weekend after that he's properly back. Garner got sent off for Everton, which no doubt you've all seen. One of those bizarre kind of once a decade moments that happens when teammates fight and a player gets sent off. As those sort of moments go, if you think back over the Premier League years, this was probably the most tame version of events. I mean, it is a red card. I don't agree with the people arguing that it's not a red card. By the letter of the law, it is. And I think we'd all be moaning about consistency if he wasn't sent off. But yeah, it was soft. Obviously, in the end, it didn't cost Everton the points. But what a ridiculous moment. And then Romero hit the 5 yellow card mark. So he'll miss Gameweek 13 and we'll be back for Gameweek 14. There are now tons of players sitting on 4 yellow cards, so I'm not going to bother going through them all. But no doubt this weekend, quite a few of them will kind of notch onto the line. And it's quite an interesting moment, given that they've got to play 3 fixtures in the space of the next, say, 9-10 days. There are certain players you do wonder if they're currently sat on 4 yellows and the manager's thinking you could probably do with a rest in that midweek fixture anyway. I wonder how many soft, yellow cards get bought. I'm looking at someone like Granit Xhaka, for example, who Sunderland got a midweek, got a home game against Newcastle. Then they follow that up with an away game to Brighton, which they might be eyeing up as more likely points. See how it goes. But I would really put under the microscope any of the players that come away with their 5th yellow card this weekend and see what the circumstances are. Luckily for Paqueta, he's already got his out of the way, so no chance of him getting embroiled into any more nonsense on that front. In terms of the fixtures for this weekend, as I said, they're all falling on Saturday and Sunday. The waiver deadline will be at 1:30 on Friday because there isn't an early Saturday kickoff. So the first set of games will be at 3 o'clock on Saturday. Brentford against Burnley, which is a nice fixture on paper, I think, there for Brentford. City at home to Leeds, of course, looks nice. But the problem with City at the moment, and has been all season, is beyond Erling Haaland, who can you really put your trust in? Sunderland then at home to Bournemouth. That should be a good game. Everton at home to Newcastle. Spurs at home to Fulham is the Saturday night game. And then on Sunday, Palace at home to Man United. That, I think, has the potential to be quite a good game too. Villa at home to Wolves. Lots of Villa players are going to be moving into our teams this weekend. Forest at home to Brighton. West Ham at home to Liverpool. Absolute huge game for Arne Slot there. Seems like the news today is, we're backing him. He's fine. His job's safe now. He's got enough credit in the bank. But yeah, a loss away at West Ham there. And the screw's really going to be getting tight. And then the big marquee fixture of the weekend, Chelsea at home to Arsenal. If Arsenal win that game, the title race will be looking pretty much to be a one-horse race after just a third of the season gone. If Chelsea win that game, they pretty much solidify themselves as the main contenders to battle Arsenal for that title, which, as a Spurs fan, it's like, would you rather we cut off your left thumb or your right thumb? Talking points. So Liverpool lose again. I've put in brackets ×2 because they obviously got beat at home to PSV Eindhoven last night in the Champions League in, just another pretty poor performance overall. As I said, Slot's job seems to be safe at the moment. But again, they're a team where it's difficult to really know who to go for in terms of fantasy players. Obviously, the Salahs, Ekitike, Gakpos of this world are all going to be firmly in your teams and in your lineups, just hoping that they're going to do something. But, usually we're sort of moving the supporting cast in and out of our draft teams too from week to week, depending on the fixtures. But it's just not worth it at the moment, is it? I mean, There is one Liverpool player I think I've got on the slides towards the end that could be worth a punt if you're in bigger leagues, but otherwise, yeah, tricky one. Ekitike is potentially going to miss this weekend, which should open the door for Isak. We haven't seen Verts back from his recent injury yet either, so not a huge amount of options, so it might actually force Slot's hand a little bit in terms of who he starts. Kanate is a big problem in the defence at the moment. I was chatting to some of the other Draft FC guys this morning about Joe Gomez. I mean, I don't know whether he's not fully fit, whether Slot just fully doesn't rate him, but at some point, surely he gets chucked in there for a game. We'll have to wait and see. I've got Joe Gomez penciled into my predicted 11 at the moment because I just don't know who else Slot might turn to try and shake things up a little bit. But yeah, we'll find out. We'll find out soon enough. And then a general point, looking at the Premier League table, still remains very tight. I know it's still quite early on in the season, but outside those top four teams, Villa, City, Chelsea and Arsenal, no team has really put up a run of form over the last sort of month or two. It really is anyone can beat anyone, out of those sort of other 16 teams, barring Wolves, who are far and away the fixture to target still. And it's really, really difficult to see how they stay up now, even with the managerial change. But beside those, Burnley away to Brentford, would you be totally shocked if Burnley won that game? Leeds away at City, you probably would be shocked. Sunderland home to Bournemouth, in looking back pre-season, you'd have been eyeing that up as part of a nice fixture run for Bournemouth. But now, if Sunderland won that game or drew that game, you wouldn't be surprised. So yeah, lots of tight fixtures every weekend, it seems, at the moment. And I think another reason why I continue to be drawn to those boring midfielders that we talked about a month or so ago now. And I've managed to add another one to my rank. So I've had Xhaka and Caicedo in my team for a couple of months at least now, pretty much from the start of the season. I managed to get Elliot Anderson on the waivers last week, which is great. I think he got 9 points in Gameweek 12, which was a nice addition. And just for reference, the player that I dropped was Mohamed Kudus, who is a flair player, a player that you're looking at getting attacking returns, but just was nowhere near consistent enough for me. I know he's missed a little bit with injury, but yeah, I've got no faith in Spurs generally anyway at the moment. I think I've made a comment in the Drafts FC Discord chat this week that I wouldn't really advocate for any of the outfielders. They're all droppable, and when I say that, there's a difference between saying they are a drop, as in they just shouldn't be in your team, and me saying they're droppable. By saying they're droppable means if there's another player you like the look of in the waivers and you're sort of umming and ahhing about whether or not you can drop them because there's some perceived value in there, I'm saying there probably isn't. So if you're strongly drawn to a player that you want and you're looking at a Spurs player in your sort of outfield squad that you're thinking about moving on, I probably wouldn't dissuade you. That goes to the likes of Solanke. I'm still sitting on Solanke, unfortunately, because there isn't really anyone good enough to tempt me to replace him with in the waiver pile. So I am just hanging on for the time being. But that's it now. Kudus was the other Spurs player I had. He's gone. And I'm more than happy to ride with Xhaka, Anderson and Caicedo as just a very easy set and forget little trio to tick over on the points. I had a little look on the Draft FC League Analytics tab just before recording, and we have a breakdown on there in terms of the positions your points have been scored from. And currently my midfield leads the way in the league. So I've got the most points from midfielders, and that's from Caicedo, Anderson, Xhaka. Saka was my first overall pick, and then I've got Ismail Assar on there. So who I'm obviously going to have to start to make plans about what I do with Sarr in the coming weeks when he disappears off to the African Cup of Nations. Do I sit on him? Do I move him on? Currently my squad is pretty robust from an African Cup of Nations point of view. He is the only player. So as it stands, I would be sitting on him if I can. But we'll have to wait and see. You never know. One game week, suddenly you get 2 or 3 new injuries and all plans go out the window. And then final point, as I've already touched on, beware the midweek game week and obviously the rotation that brings. There are certain players are not going to be able to play 3 Premier League games in the space of 8 days, which is what a few of these players are going to be asked to do. So, anyone that's been injured recently, anyone that has a bit of an injury track record, there's going to be high chance that they're rotated, particularly for that midweek game. So, yeah, this is where you've got to make sure your squad is robust enough to handle that and that you've got options that can come off of the bench. Let's get into the main picks. And I think because of some of the nature of the players that are getting dropped at the moment and more people, I think, getting drawn to some of these more steady midfielders and defenders, it means the waiver piles look a hell of a lot more attractive than they probably ever would have done at this stage in the season. And now there's obviously a reason for that. You know, someone like Mohamed Kudus, too many one-pointers. And so whilst they look like a glitzy name in the waiver pile, when you actually have a look deep down at what they're putting up week to week, is the reason they're being dropped and the reason why we've got the likes of Caicedo and Granit Xhaka as pretty nailed on mainstays. Cullens, Florentinos, all these guys, that's why. It's because they're not putting up one-pointers very regularly at all. In terms of defenders, the Villa guys, as I said, there's going to be a few Villa players in this episode. Home game against Wolves, which in any week at the moment is the fixture that you should be looking out for first in, who's playing Wolves. And then if they're at home, just another added bonus. So Pau Torres and Konsa are on there as centre-back options. Pau Torres is the most likely to be available, 11% owned in engaged 8-team leagues. Konsa's ownership is a little bit higher. Cash and Dina, their ownership is way above, so you might be struggling to find those guys. Brentford, obviously, at home to Burnley. As much as I said a minute ago, you wouldn't be shocked if Burnley won. You also wouldn't be shocked if Brentford won that game 2-0, for example. So the Brentford defenders are another one that I'm sure will be pretty hot property this week. Collins on there with 19% ownership. Hincapié, obviously, I think will be another popular one. Anyone that gambled on Mosquera who could go this way now, I think should make that change. So 34% owned. So he is still available in a lot of engaged 8-team leagues there. I would not be put off by the fixture away to Chelsea. They can get a clean sheet in any game, pretty much against any team in the world right now. So do not be put off by that. And then the Newcastle defence is another one that I know is popular. The only trouble with the Newcastle defence is trying to work out who on earth is going to play. Dan Burn missed last game week because of suspension. And we saw Shah come back into the 11 too. I think he also started their midweek Champions League game against Marseille. Livramento's back in there. He's on the list. Thiaw, I think, is probably number one in terms of safety. Lewis Hall came in at left back. So you're looking at Burn, Botman and Shah potentially competing over one spot, or at least that's how it should read. Knowing Eddie Howe, Lewis Hall will get dropped. Dan Burn will be back at the left back. It'll be Botman and Thiaw, Livramento right back with the absolute classic Howe. But it should be Hall left back, Livramento right back, and then two of those defenders. But it is going to make it tricky to pick one out of the waiver pile. And then Robertson's there, who I think has to start that game away at West Ham. And if for whatever reason you want a bit of the Liverpool defence, then there's plenty of Robbos about in your waiver piles. And then into midfield, Elliot Anderson, who, as I said, I brought in last game week. Interestingly, Elliot Anderson's roster percentage dropped last week. I think his net percentage ownership went down about 4 or 5% in engaged 8-team leagues, which is interesting. They've got a home game against Brighton, which I like the look of on paper for them. It should be a good battle at least, which lends itself well to players like Anderson, who we're counting on getting DEFCONs as well as anything else. Cullen away to Brentford again, just for a sort of boring 4-pointer, but seemingly always good odds to pop up with a goal as well. Buendia for Villa should start, and don't need to say any more about the fixture, and he's in good form recently. Dango Ouattara could be a good fixture for him. He looked pretty sharp in their last game. And I think if you can get him or teammate Kevin Schade, it's interesting what the sort of roster percentage difference is between Dango and Schade. Schade almost twice as popular currently, whether that's a bit of a hangover from pre-season still, and given how well he sort of pitched in the rankings last year versus Dango, who was in and out of the team for a little bit. If you're really not sure, or if you've got a couple of injuries that you're worried about, then I think you have to go Kevin Schade, because at least with Schade, you know 100% that he's going to start. If for whatever reason Brentford decide to go with a back three, now I can't think of any reason off the top of my head why Brentford would opt to go for 3 at the back against Burnley. But if they did, then obviously that means, based on what we've seen, Dango Ouattara would miss out. So the minutes are far less assured. But if I knew they were both starting, you know who I'm gonna go for. But that's not to say I'm not a big Kevin Schade fan. as well, which you will know I am. Marino on there, like I said, very surprised that he was on the list of most wavered out players. Continues to chip in with returns. And the way Arsenal set up against Spurs, I mean, the analysis has been done to death, but essentially Arteta either guessed or at least allowed for the fact last minute that Spurs would set up with a back five and just did a very clever, simple adjustment, which was to basically play without anyone as a number 9. It wasn't even a false 9. It was just kind of quite a few players inhabiting that kind of zone 14, number 10 position. The wide players and the fullbacks getting into annoying positions to drag other players out of the way. And then just letting a whole clutch of those guys, whether that's Trossard, Eza, Saka, Marino, Rice, just make little runs in behind that kind of flat back three with little through balls, which just kept working time and time again. We actually saw Spurs kind of look equally vulnerable to that against PSG last night, albeit in a slightly different way. But it was a very simple, elegant tactic, which Spurs just didn't cotton on to quick enough at all. I think away at Chelsea, Marino may well be more of a conventional false 9, trying to occupy those centre-backs a little bit more, which just makes it a bit more likely for him to get an attacking return. Gordon I've put on there just because it's hard to believe how low his ownership's got at 57%. That away game to Everton, I think the consensus seems to be that he will start that game. And as poor as this form has been so far this season, we know what he can do on his day. Obviously, Everton are going to have to make some change to their pre-settled starting 11. I'm guessing Timmy Rugbenham will come in for Ghana, but it's still a little bit of disruption and could just lend itself to Newcastle having quite a good day. And as much as Everton have been really impressive this season and they're at home, do kind of fancy Newcastle in this fixture. And then the final one is Ryan Cherki for City. Pretty high ownership at 70%. But aside from Haaland, he's probably, if I had total free choice of all the other players at City, he's probably the one that I would be looking to pick up for that home game against Leeds. Because, as we've said before, if Haaland is having a big day and if Cherki is on the pitch, then I fully expect the two to be linking up. Up top, and some forward options, which generally are going to be like your third forward options or options if you're in big leagues where anyone getting minutes becomes valuable. Despite my doom and gloom about Spurs, Kolo Muani has been a bit of a shining light this week. He had a really, really good game against PSG. Now, it's obviously complicated because he is technically still a PSG player. So, if he's going to turn it on in any game, that's the game he's going to want to show off what he's about and try and impress, make them regret passing him around Europe on loan for the last couple of years. So, but he did look good. He looked sharp and he was able to do stuff, particularly his second goal, that I don't think really any other Spurs player in the squad, even when fully fit, can do. Just that kind of 2 or 3 yards acceleration, turn of pace, and get that shot away. In the absence of Heung-min Son, he's probably the only other player in recent seasons that I could have said is able to do that sort of a goal. So, yeah, it did stand out. And I think if he's okay, he will probably play 2 out of the next 3 fixtures for Spurs. And say home game against Fulham at the weekend is quite nice on paper. Then away to Newcastle, which is a terrible fixture generally for Spurs. And then a home game against Brentford, where Frank takes on his own team, which they will be bang up for, no doubt. So, and no doubt he will too. So it's going to be a big week for Spurs, and it could be a big week potentially for Kolo Muani to solidify that number 9 spot. And I do think it would be as the number 9. I think if Richarlison and him are on the pitch, I would far more prefer to see Muani as the 9 and Richarlison left wing. As a general point, I'd prefer to just see a little bit less of Richarlison in the team, full stop. Now, it's obviously been needs must at the moment given the injuries, but I think he's the only outfielder, if you're in a bigger league looking for a bit of a wild card punt, he's the only outfielder I'd really punt on picking up. And Solanke right now, I have absolutely no idea where he's at. It could be 2026 before we see him at this rate. The news goes from sort of lukewarm to cold to lukewarm to cold. So, yeah, as I said, I've currently got him firmly propping up the back end of my bench because I don't really have any other better options that I'm looking at on the waivers. But yeah, if you've picked him up recently, hoping that he'd be back soon because of what I've said, I would get rid if you can. Igor Jesus for Forest sounds like he'll be playing at least the next 1 or 2 fixtures. Wood doesn't sound like he's 100% fit yet. Callum Wilson with a nice brace against his old club in game week 12. Given the form that Liverpool's defence in, you wouldn't bet against him scoring in a third consecutive game. And then Fleming for Burnley continues to be their starting striker. So he's getting 1 or 2 points a week at least, which for some of you may be quite important. Hidden gems, so players with less than 10% ownership in defence. We've got Coyote if you want into that Brentford defence, just a slither under the 10% mark. Lewis Hall's on there, but I'd be reluctant to bring him in. I think if you already got him, then you hold him. But yeah, if you're in a kind of 8, 9, 10 team league where you've got lots of options available on the waivers, Hall is not risk I think I'll be punting on. Joe Gomez is on there if you want to take that risk. But again, I think that's probably more for larger leagues. And if you really wanted a way into the Spurs defence, we have seen Spurs keep some clean sheets this season. It feels like a long time ago, given the week they've had. But Kevin Danso will be in at right centre-back because of Romero's ban for 5 yellow cards. So home game against Fulham, chance of an assist with one of those rocket launcher long throws. Not the worst one you could bring in for a little 1-week punt. In midfield, quite a few options. Jeremy really did have his breakout game. He was, I don't know if he was officially man of the match, but he was my man of the match in their fixture in game week 12. Looked really, really good. And yeah, I think we'll continue to play behind Mateta alongside Ismail Assar for now. But the key thing is going to be trying to work out who Palace slot in there when Ismail Assar goes away to the African Cup of Nations in a few weeks, whether they just move Kamada back further forward, and because they've got a few options, obviously in central midfield, so they could opt to do that. But yeah, Jeremy, as much as he's been a nearly man up to now, could really kick on from that performance. I say there is going to be a bit of a hole to fill once Sarr leaves, and he could be coming into form at just the right time. Damsgaard is on there. He's not done a huge amount recently, but it's more just for the fixture point of view. Brennan Johnson, again, I know I said I wouldn't really talk or advocate. He's just purely a 1-week punt. He didn't really feature in the North London derby. I can't remember if he even came on as a substitute in that game. Was banned in the Champions League game because he got sent off. And I've got a feeling he will play and start this match. Kudus isn't 100%. We've seen the pair of them play together where essentially Kudus and Xavi Simons are both kind of like advanced 8s / number 10s, which still leaves room for Brennan Johnson wide right. And then you have potentially the left back, whoever that may be. I'm expecting it to be Udogie, adding the width on the left-hand side. So yeah, that's what I foresee. And obviously, it is a punt, but if it does come off, then we know, regardless of what his performances look like, he has an uncanny knack of scoring goals when he's on the pitch. Marlon on there for Villa. He's quite a popular topic of conversation this week. I'm not 100% sure that he starts, but he'll certainly see minutes regardless, and that may be good enough for you. Teammate McGinn's on there as well if you want a really boring way into that Villa midfield and a bit more of a safer pair of hands in terms of minutes. Madueke obviously comes into the conversation given the possible injury to Trossard. If Trossard is out, then I expect him to be the one that slots back in. I think he's way above Martinelli in the pecking order against his old club, so there's a bit of an expected narrative stat there as well, bubbling along. So it would all make sense. But I'm guessing they're hoping if Trossard is okay, then it's sort of business as usual and he'll carry on at the left wing because he's been really, really solid from there. And then a couple of starting forward options who below 10%, Barry for Everton and Nemecha for Leeds, who I did have, I think, in the predicted starting 11 for Leeds last game against Villa, and he did start, scored a goal. He doesn't look incredible. I think he's just seems to be a little bit more likely to start than Calvert-Lewin. They are quite similar players in a lot of regards, so it's not like one's providing a drastic change to the other. But yeah, Calvert-Lewin just hasn't done anything for me since he's joined there. Fantastic Fours was a bad week last week. Only Viffa hit the 4 points, which just solidifies again how underrated I think he is. For this week, gone for a few new faces. I'm chasing that form with Murillo, home game against Brighton. Teammate Anderson's on there too. So hopefully I don't jinx him for my own draft team. Viffa stays on there because, I'm going to keep flying that Viffa flag. And then the other one who we've talked about before, but not so much recently, is Ryan Sessegnon. Obviously, he is listed as a mid, but in very, very good form. If we go back to since game week 7, he's given 9 points, 2 points. That was a game against Arsenal. 4 points, 14 points, 4 points, and 3 points. During that spell, he's hit the DEFCON threshold twice, but there's been an 11, a 10, a couple of 10s. So he's also, obviously, he's playing in defence. The annoying thing is, because he's a mid, he has to hit 12 in order to get those 2 points. But again, a bit of expected narrative against his former club. Obviously, scored against us last year. And another game, I think he personally will be bang up for this game. So, yeah, I'm quite happy with that set of fantastic fours going into Gameweek 13. Predicted lineups are done, but I'll say it again. I'm expecting a handful of totally random rotation swaps, depending on how the managers want to play with their squad over the next 2-3 game weeks. So don't be surprised about them if they come. There won't be necessarily, doesn't mean they're injured, doesn't mean they're out of favour. It just means the manager doesn't want them playing 270 minutes in the space of a week. So make sure your squad's robust enough to deal with that if and when that does happen. So that will do for this episode. I've pretty much got to finish recording this, get it edited, get it out, and then already start thinking about doing the Game Week 14 preview. But we love it. We love it, don't we? So if you enjoyed the pod, make sure you're following on whichever podcast platform you listen on. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a follow. Click the thumbs up button. It doesn't cost you anything. And of course, comment any comments, queries, dilemmas below, and I'll get back to you. Similar to most weeks, if you comment those before close of play on Thursday, there's a high chance I respond directly to your messages. If you start commenting late, kind of Friday morning up until the waiver deadline, there's a very high chance that I won't respond prior to the waivers being processed because I will be beavering away at my day job. You also follow us on X at draft_FC. We are mildly active in that cesspit at times. And of course, if you haven't checked out draftfc.co.uk, then I'd urge you to go over there and have a look. Draft FC Taz is constantly beavering away, making things better on there. We've got some big plans over the next couple of months, which, given some of the changes Taz is working on at the moment, should mean we're able to implement changes and improvements very, very quickly. Yeah, given the volume of games coming up at the moment, monthly is just $3.99 a month. So sign up now, and even if you only keep it for a couple of months over the winter period, £8 will give you a hell of a lot of value. Access to all of the stats that I use on the pod, the roster changes, the waiver changes, our expected points model. I don't even know what version it is now. Version 3.0 is up and running. The league analytics, the live game week feature, global rank, all sorts of stuff on there. So if you haven't been there, go and check it out. And the biggest thing is you'll be allowed in. We'll give you a key to the Draft FC Discord channel, which is probably worth more than everything else put together. So we'll leave things there for this week. Best of luck for your matchups and leagues in Game Week 13. And until next time, which won't be very long, stay sharp.